Hello, Year 8, and welcome to our third and final lesson into our inquiry into local soldiers from our area. So last lesson we were looking at having the sources, making inferences from them, beginning to really start that investigation to get all of the information that we needed to write the biography. And obviously in the previous lesson before that, we were looking at what makes a biography a good biography in the first place, and what information and sources we needed. So naturally then we've come to this lesson, which is planning our biography. And today we're going to be looking at, well, how can you turn all of that lovely information that you've got, all of that hard work that you've done for your investigation, and turn it into a biography that you've written. So we've got a task here to start off with, and I've got three different examples from three different biographies that I've written of George Newton. What I want you to do is answer these two questions down below. So I want you to, first off, you've got to read through the three examples, and then I want you to say, what do you think is the best one and why, and include at least two reasons to what makes it the best example. And then we've got, what do you think is the worst one and why, and include two reasons as to what makes it the worst example. So what is missing from that worst example that the others have. And again, I've put this at the bottom here, but saying it's longer or it's shorter isn't a good enough reason. I'm not going to take that, okay? I want you to include at least two reasons for both of those questions, and then the stretching challenge, if you can do that. I'm going to give you 5 minutes now, guys. So if you pause the video for 5 minutes and answer those questions. Thank you. So guys, we'll come back now from your 5-minute break. So looking at these then, hopefully you've identified that example C is the best one. And there's different reasons what makes it the best one, but when comparing it with the others, first off, it's just that level of detail. So for example, he says that whereas if we look at example B, it says he worked in a chalk quarry. Example A says he worked in a chalk quarry with his dad. Example C goes that one step further. He says he was employed as a labourer in the chalk quarries where his father was a foreman. So you've got that level of detail, explaining what his dad worked as. And we know we got that evidence from a census. And one of his friends, Reuben. So again, there's like comparing of different soldiers, different biographies, linking them together. So that's a really good way to show that you've got, round source knowledge there. So that's very detailed, example C there. I'm not expecting all of you to produce something but that's what you should aim for, especially if you're going for those stretch and challenge sort of levels. Definitely aim for that sort of detail there. And another reason is, again, the sort of sources that you use. So in example B, for example, there's no sources used. Example A talks about the 1911 census. For example C goes up one step further. It says the 1911 census, and it says the post-war pension card that we looked at as well, which was sent to his mum. So that's not only showing that you're using multiple sources, but it's cross-referencing. It's that skill of cross-referencing because they're using two sources to prove one piece of information. And as we know, to make a historical claim, it needs to be based on more than one source. So that's why I've said it's the best one. Challenge C to what do you think it could be done to make it even better? Possibly you might have said even more details. There might have been information that I've missed out on there that you've picked up on that you might want to include. For example, you could say, it says he was the oldest of 4 children. Well, maybe you'd want to say his brothers and his sisters' names, because we know that we have those. Or it says 4 children, but you could say how many sisters he had, how many brothers he had. So it's just that extra level of detail using all of that knowledge that you've got from our inquiry. And what do you think is the worst one? I've sort of said this already, but example B is lacking in that detail, and it's not really giving us any indication that sources have been used. So it says, he was born in Hornchurch in 1982, but how do we know that? It hasn't said. Both of these have talked about the census. This hasn't talked about any. So example A or C, I would be happy with, guys. A lot of you, either going to aim for example A or example C. Obviously, you want to produce the best thing you can. But example B, we wouldn't really take that as a good answer, because there's been no indication that, the person that's written example B has used sources or anything like that. And that's the main point of this inquiry, guys, is to get you thinking about those source skills and how you can actually use those source skills outside of the history class. How I don't need to teach it to you, how you can actually use what you've learned and go and investigate your own family's history, for example. Okay, cool. So going on to our title for today then, how can I write a good historical biography of a soldier? So first off, we're going to be identifying the information included and the structure of a historical biography. So I'm going to show you a whole example that I've written, and what you're going to do is you're going to identify what information I've included and what structure I've used. So for example, pretty much the paragraphs that I've used to break up that information, which is really, really important there. Secondly, we're going to be organising our information and evidence for a local soldier's biography. So that's looking at the first lesson, but especially the second lesson, all of that information that you've collected yourselves through your investigation, organising it into that sort of structure. How can you use different pieces of information? How can you show that you're using different sources? And then finally, we're going to be beginning to write our historical biography. We're not going to be writing the whole thing today. It's going to be your homework task to finish it off, but I'm going to ask the other history teachers as well as myself, my classes, I'm going to be saying that it's not going to be due in until about a week after half term. I think I've said the Friday after half term. So from this lesson, you'll have at least 2 and a bit weeks to be able to do this and do it to a good standard. Okay, so that's the 3 things we're going to be looking at today. Okay, so using the information we've collected in an investigation, I've written a biography for Newton. So Newton was one of the 3 men we were looking at. So this is one that this is the example that I've written for George William Newton, who is one of the 3 men that we were looking at. You are going to actually write a biography for Satch or Beaumont. Obviously, you can't just copy one for Newton. So you're going to be writing one for Satch or Beaumont. But first of all, I thought it'd be best to show you an example of something that I've written for Newton. So sorry if you did want to write a biography for Newton, but you'll be doing Satch or Beaumont. So first of all, I want you to read this, read it thoroughly, make sure you understand it. You're at home, and I know if you're watching this, you've got internet connection, so any words that you don't understand, you can Google there on information that you need to check up on. You can definitely do that. What information have I included? So I want to read through it, make a list of at least 4 points. For example, I've obviously included his name, but maybe you go a bit more detailed than that. So at least 4 things that I've included. And then the second one is, how have I organised biography? So how are the paragraphs split up, and what names could you give for the paragraph headings? So for example, if you read the first paragraph, you could give it the heading of early life. So maybe think about, for the other 3, what headings could you give to those paragraphs? And then number 3, how have I shown this biography is based on historical sources? So how have I shown the skill of being able to use historical sources, which I obviously said was really important to this whole series of lessons we've been looking at. And then we've got a stretch and challenge task there. How have I shown cross-referencing skill? So that's a higher level skill, but how have I shown in this that I'm using multiple sources to check my information, my historical claims? I've said 6 minutes there. That 6 minutes should start after you've read the biography. I'm not going to read it out for you. I want you to read it, okay? So pause the video now, read through it, and then take 6 minutes to answer those 3 questions. Okay, guys, so these are the answers that you should have got. So, for example, for the first one, I've made a list. So I've included, this is all the information that I've included, but I've included his rank. So I've said that he's like a private right there in the heading. I said when he's died, when he's born, his family, his work, because I've said he's worked in the chalk quarries, what his service number is here, and that was obviously crucial to finding out that the men were all in the Purfleet Pals together. And then I've included information about the Pals Battalion and friends. I've given information of the 1st Essex, memorial and gravesite information, and remembrance and information. So this is how I split it up. I should have identified that I split it up here, okay? I've got his name and his years alive, okay? So that's a really important thing to do in a biography. You always give their name. Because we're doing a biography of a soldier here, we put private, so we put his rank, so people straight away reading it know what his rank was. And then when he was born and when he sadly died. And then the way that we split this up is, I've obviously said for the first one, I said life before the war. This one you could say, if you're reading it, the paragraph is all about his signing up with his friends. This is about the history of the 1st Essex and how he died. And then the final paragraph is about memorial and remembrance. This is how I split it up. It's how I'd recommend you split it up if you're a bit unsure of the structure for your paragraphs, but you can do it in any structure you want as long as it makes sense to yourself and in general. A best way to do it, guys, is once you've written it, get someone to read it and check it over. Make sure that it makes sense to them. Then, how have I shown this is based on historical sources? So throughout, I've done things such as I've done shown by the 1911 census, shown by the post-war pension card. I've said identified by military records here. I've said research by a local historian. I've said memorial and gravesite information. So throughout, I'm not just saying, for example, the first Essex landed in Turkey. I'm saying how I know that. And that's how you show that you really have used those sources with your own knowledge and not just, Googled it or found it on Wikipedia, right? You're actually using those historical sources to make your own claims about this person in the past. And that's what makes a historian, right? It's having that sound historical basis to all of your answers. And then the stretch and challenge task, I've said that I've shown multiple sources for the same information. And that's how you show cross-referencing, guys. So that stretch and challenge. So I've shown here, 2 bottom shows are shown by the 1911 census and the post-war pension. So we're looking at the starter task, but that's how you show cross-referencing. You look at the same piece of information and you show how different sources are being made to make that claim. Okay, so we're moving on now to planning your biography. So this is the planning sheet that I've made for you to plan your biography, and I've filled it out with an example for how I plan my Newton biography. So this biography, before I even started writing it at all, the most important thing I did was plan it. That biography there is all based on this planning sheet here. So it says, firstly, decide whether you're going to write a biography for Essex or Beaumont. Yeah, that's really important. So I don't care who you do. You can do whatever one you want, but just decide, have that information in your head. Again, doesn't matter which one you choose, just choose one. So you now need to get up your information sheet from last lesson and the paragraph you wrote on what happened to the first Essex on the 6th of August. Basically, just get up all of your notes over the last lessons on World War I local study. And then using your information sheet, your notes, and any information, you're going to fill in the biography planning sheet on the right. And on the right is an example of what I did for Newton. So you can look at this as a basis, right, guys? So I looked at all of the information that I had on Newton, and I looked at all the sources that I had. So for life before the war, that's the paragraph heading I was going to use. And I thought, well, what do I need to include about his life before the war? Obviously, the important thing is where he was born, who his family were, where he worked. So I wrote all that information down, but then to remind me to include those sources in my biography and reference them, I put here what sources I reference. This is really, really important, guys. That's why I kept coming back to that skill where I'm saying, as shown by this source, as shown by that source, cross-referencing it there, because I've actually noted down what sources I need to talk about in this. So you need to look through all of that information you have and do as I've done. Look for all the information. For example, if you're doing Beaumont, get all of your information on Beaumont, write down all of that information that you need to write. So next, we've got this is our blank planning sheet there. So make sure you really understand the example that I've done there. And then you need to go into your blank planning sheet here. So I went through that example with you for all that information that you had. And you need to fill in the table for your chosen soldier using the blank template. So again, like I said, it doesn't matter if you do Satch or Beaumont. You can do whatever one you want to do, but you just need to choose one. This should take about 10 minutes. It might take a bit longer if you need to find out and dig up all of those sources and notes. You need to take all of that information here. Maybe you want to print this off or fill it in, right? But you need to make sure you have all of that information so it should match something like what I've done here for whatever chosen soldier you're going to do. So just take 10, 15 minutes there, guys, to collect all that information together and fill out this planning sheet. Okay, guys, so finally, writing your biography. So it's now time to finally turn all of that hard work that you've done, investigating and planning, into a biography and become a true local historian. So using everything you've learned, all the information you've investigated and the sources you've used, produce the best biography you can. Just base it on that planning sheet that you literally just did. You don't need to look at the sources again, guys. That's why it's really important to get your planning sheet exactly right. Use that there. And on the right, I've shown you for whatever level you're aiming at, okay? So if you're aiming at a good level, a better level, best, try and make the best one you can, but this is to give you an indication of when we get the biography back as teachers, what we're going to be marking it on, okay? So the best answer will have all of this, the better answer will have that, the good answer will have that. And you can read through that yourself, make sure you really understand it, what level you're going to go for. But obviously, like I said, try and go for the best you can. I'm hoping that everyone at least tries to go for that better level. That should be kind of your minimum. But a good answer is okay if that's what you feel like you can do. But try and go for that better level if you can. On the next 3 slides are examples of a biography that would get us good, better, and best, along with help and tips for each one. Go for the best level challenge you can. You'll be finishing this and submitting it for your homework task this week. So please submit your biography onto Show My Homework by the Friday, the 5th of June. So you've got quite a time, guys, about 2 weeks now to be able to do that. So I'm going to go through each of them now for you. And for whatever one you want to do, you can pause the video there. But first of all, we're going to look at what makes a good answer here, guys. So this is an example biography that I've written of George Newton. Sorry, guys. So this is an example that I've written of George Newton here. So that's my dog barking. So this is an example here that I've written of George Newton that would get a good level answer, right? And I've put your success criteria here that I'll be marking it against. And if you're going for good, you can use this writing frame if you want to. I've written a writing frame for the biography if you want to use that. So if you are going for the good level, pause it here and go for this. If you want to go for a bit more of a challenge, then just go on to the next slide that I'll be going on to. So next we have the better example, okay? So this is, again, a better example that I've written that would get the better grade. We've got the success criteria here, which is like the marking, and then I've given you a few sentence starters as the tips, guys. I'm going to let you read through this information yourself. It should be quite straightforward, but this is just an example that I've written. You need to produce something like this to be able to get the better grade, okay? So for the highest level of challenge, we've got our best example. I'll put myself here. So from my best example, this is what I've written for Newton that would get that best example. I've put the success criteria marking that you need to get here to be able to get that. And I've done some tips here. So I've said, do your own research and see what else you can include. This is quite hard. Try it yourself. Maybe you might be able to find a bit more information about the army or the local area, or maybe you might have spoken to a family member that knows a bit more. Feel free to include that as long as you know it's historically accurate and you're basing it on something and you say what you're basing it on. Include interesting vocabulary choices. So show me there maybe a historically, different words for different skills and stuff like that you found, or different military terminology that you can include. And then show usefulness and cross-referencing. So that's what's going to get you that really high mark, guys. Show that you understand the different sources are useful for different things and that you know how to cross-reference. But that is it. So thank you very much, guys, for paying attention to this whole 3 lessons. I can't wait to read your biographies and have a lovely half term. Thank you very much.